Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. Cindy, let's dive into the first one.
Our first one today is from Aaron Jencarel in Flagstaff, Arizona, USA. I'm curious to hear if the panel has experienced a reduction in workload this year. Have the current circumstances impacted anyone's workload?
Courtney, start us off.
Not sure what you mean by current circumstances. Maybe the financial state of being in the last few weeks with the stock markets in a tumble. There has been a reduction in production in Hollywood, where I am, definitely this year. A lot of runaway productions running to other countries, other cities that are offering better cash backs into the producer's pocket, tax incentives to shoot in their particular neighborhood. I just saw the movie Novocaine, set in San Diego, shot mostly in South Africa. So, they took the money and ran. I only had a $16 million budget, but right now the unions and other labor organizations from Hollywood are up in Sacramento lobbying the state legislature to double the tax incentives for California this year to like $780 million, which doesn't sound like a lot when you're talking about government, the government's billion-dollar spending, but it does. That's for a whole year that they will invest in indies to bring production back with tax incentives to California. So hopefully that will pick up production. And I've also noticed a downturn in corporate production, that corporate producers are not producing as much. Maybe it's just because of the time of year. They don't have a lot of statements to do. They've finished their annual reports for the previous year, and then first quarter reports aren't done yet. But it seems to have slowed down there, and as far as I'm concerned.
Bill?
Yeah, there's been a clear shift, I think, and I think the landscape is changing. And most of the work that I used to do, particularly the higher end stuff, was for broadcast. I mean, traditional terrestrial broadcast, network spots and things like that. And you can just see that the eyeballs and the viewers are migrating from there onto the web and onto other consumption devices, as opposed to sitting in their living room en masse and watching television every night. That still happens, and those things are there. But in the middle of that disruption and change of habits, whenever fear enters a process, people just decide, okay, I'm not going to spend, I'm not going to launch this project, I'm going to hold off, look at the landscape and see where I fit into the new thing, which is, you can't really blame anybody because it's smart. You don't know for sure if the old processes you're used to going through that created your income stream in your living are going to remain, or whether they're going to be disrupted. So I'm sensing that out there. The number of calls, the number of people in the meetings that I go to with old friends, a lot of instability out there, and instability is never good for business. That's my 2 cents.
Jonas?
I would say there certainly is a difference in workload from the corporate side. A lot of corporates are unsure how to proceed currently, and that has been the case since January. There's just a lot of uncertainty. On the other side, it's the first time since 5 years ago that I had more European customers asking to replace AWS with other providers. So that's more workload, and I've seen a lot of that trend marching on right now.
Alex?
And what's the push to get rid of AWS?
It's an American company.
Oh, there we go. Very good. So I think as far as film goes, I think that there's a whole bunch of things happening at one time. One thing is that a lot of filmmakers are talking about the fact that studios are very risk adverse at this point, and they're not. And what they want to see is fully developed projects. They want everything all packaged up and handed to them. So it creates a lot of work for the folks that want to put together the film, because they have to do a bunch of stuff without getting paid, and that's what the studios want, is you to do a bunch of work without getting paid. And so that makes it harder for them to go down that path. The streamers really don't care where it gets produced, and so a lot of this stuff is happening elsewhere. There are a variety of different advantages. The tax advantages are one big piece of it. Obviously, once you move overseas, there's just raw cost is you're at an advantage, just in the cost of labor mostly. The equipment is about the same, but the labor is much less expensive. I mean, when I say much, 25% less. But when you're talking about millions of dollars, that adds up to real dollars. And so there's more of that. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the capacity has changed. 5 years ago, there weren't that many places that had enough people. It's not having a filmmaker or a grip or a camera operator. It's having a ecosystem. The rental companies, many people that you can hire for the infrastructure. And that's changed globally. I mean, that has really become, and a lot of that has to do because the streamers have been doing so much production overseas and so much production outside of California that the rest of the world has kind of matured, and so California has a lot less that's different to offer than they did, before COVID. And so, the theatrical stuff, there's still a lot of production going on. Theatrical is definitely taking a hit. They can't guarantee what's going to happen next. It used to be we put this much money in, we get this much money out for a lot of the stuff, but that was because they were just doing churn in, churn out. Like they were they had a formula, and I think people have gotten tired of the formula. And so now the problem is that you have that, and again, the thing that is constantly threatening theatrical is the fact that we got used to not having it. We now have very large screens at home. You can buy a 98-inch screen TV at $1,600 at Costco. That is a brutal. Like once you buy a 98-inch screen TV, you'll never go back to the theater. I know that people think that they'll talk about the social aspect of it or whatever, but you're never going to watch a movie at a theater after you've invested in a 98-inch screen TV, and that is a real challenge for the theatrical release industry.
Ronnie?
Yeah, and just to continue on top of Alex, you also need ambio audio soundbar as well to go with a. I mean,
you don't need an ambio. I mean, surround works great. I mean, it's still but I will say that visually, everybody I've talked to that has over an 85-inch screen TV, you just talk to them and go, how often do you go out to the movies? And they're like, maybe once a year. Like it is, because it's, and even then they go, well, I don't know if it was worth it or not, because now the visual quality is caught up. It's not as good as the theater. It's just, and the problem is, for every great experience with the audience laughing and everything else, there's three teenagers giggling one row back that kind of ruins the experience. And so that's the problem is that also, I think that the what people think is okay in a theater has changed, I think, after COVID. Like, I just think that they're much less orderly, and it's made it much less fun to go.
Yeah, totally. According to the numbers in the questions, in Norway, we see some of the trends that Jonas referred to as of changing away from some of the most used American-owned services, but not to that degree that we are actually increasing work. Numbers in total productions in our industry in Norway has actually been larger in 24 than in 23. I think it's an increase around 7-8% in total. But one thing which is kind of baffling for me is that the fourth quarter numbers are down 7% in 24 compared to the fourth quarter of 23. So there is definitely something going on. So I think that has to do with, maybe it's the same number of jobs, but maybe there is a little bit more price sensitivity, so we have to kind of lower our prices a bit. I'm not sure entirely, so I'm looking forward to have the first quarter of 25 numbers in and have a look at that.
Courtney?
Well, things may be looking up. I did stumble across this story yesterday that our friends at Apple are building a nice giant production facility here in Venice, California, off Venice Boulevard in Culver City. Right near Amazon Studios and Culver Studios. And it looks like a walled garden. How great. Yeah. And they plan, this is a facility designed for Apple TV Plus and Apple Music. And they have pledged to invest something like $300 billion in production in the Los Angeles area. The building should be finished next year, 2026. So we'll see. Maybe there'll be an uptick in production if they go into producing more and more stuff for their streaming services. So there's that hopes. And, Amazon has taken over one of the studios in Hollywood and the old Culver Studios. And Netflix has taken over not Sunset Gower, they're partially in there, and Sunset Bronson Studios. They've taken over a large portion of that. So there's a lot of expansion by the streaming services now. So there's could be an uptick in production there.
Alex?
Yeah, and on the corporate side, I think a lot of people are trying to figure out which way is up in the sense that they haven't really gotten online events to work super well, but the physical events have just, the attendance has dropped off for a lot of the corporate events, has dropped off dramatically because, so they're not serving, it's a really interesting problem in the industry right now. They're not able to serve the folks online with what they want to see. And that has to, and I think that has a lot to do with, we've talked about this many, many times. The visual and audio quality is so low on online events that it doesn't make it worth watching them for a very long time. And so that isn't serving the market, but people aren't coming to the physical events either. There's not like nobody's coming, but the numbers have dropped off fairly heavily. And so a lot of corporations are trying to figure out like how do they re-engage that audience. And I don't think they have it figured out. And that's also caused a little bit of a slowdown in production.
Your questions and votes drive the show, so remember you can use Makana to not only ask the questions, but also chat about the questions and vote on the questions. If you wonder why we'll chew on something for a little longer or move it up in the queue, it's because it gets the most votes. And if you want to vote, you can sign up at officehours.global/join. Just sign up there. You'll get links on how to get into Makana, but also our Discord and more, so check that out. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, USA asks, is this the best webcam? With a YouTube link.
Ronnie?
I'm not sure. It could be. The webcam discussion is broad and has gone on forever. What I have found is that there is one thing that is really, really annoying, and that's looking at the webcam that either have full focus all the way back to the background and causing the image that is being streamed a little bit lower. There are many discussions going around on this. And so I would say choose the webcam you can afford. The best webcam for me is something that can be sitting in its place all the time and can be used for other stuff as well if I need to put it in my pocket and walk away. So I've chosen to go for the Sony ZV-E10, the first version, paired with a kind of good lens with, I think it's 1.4. And what I achieve with that is a good color quality. I have insanely quick detailed focus, which is probably not working now because of the lack of light. And that keeps my eyes in focus because Sony has this incredible autofocus, which can focus on me either if I'm moving forth and back and have me be looking much sharper than I am in the reality. The other thing is the flexibility, which we are needing when we send out some kits, or we have cameras that need to be easier to use. And then we use this Insta360 Link camera, which is probably not either this time focusing the right way, but you get the gist of it. So that is a PTZ camera, which is kind of good for the price and pretty decent picture quality, and has a lot of functionality as well in the app as well. And I would mention also, you can use your phone. iPhones are really, really cool as a camera application. And if you're using this on a Mac, you can easily use that as your main camera. So that's my 2 cents.
Jonas?
No. I think it doesn't have enough on it. Like, I really love it when established brands suddenly realize that there's this really cool concept that humans have come up with that are interchangeable lenses. I think that is really nice. I think it could be a good solution. I'm a little worried about seeing mostly 9:16 frames on it, which that is something that is really weird right now for webcams still, because like some programs request the frame to be like rotated 90 degrees. Some of them actually need you to put in 9:16 as the resolution, and there's less standardization there. I would say if you want to go to an interchangeable MFT lens, this doesn't seem to be open. Like, I would just get a Blackmagic Micro Studio G2. It's smaller. You can also rotate it by 90 degrees. It doesn't have the direct webcam out, but yeah, I'm not a big fan of how it looks, and it just feels like a problem waiting to happen. Also, like, how many of you have their webcam pretty close back to the wall because they need enough space between them and themselves so they're not too huge? And I really hate it when manufacturers put all the ports sticking out at the back, because that just feels like an oversight.
Alex?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. One thing that's missing here, a glaring thing that's missing, is the price. Like, we don't know how much they're charging for this camera. So I think that's a really, I mean, at $800, we'd probably buy a bunch of them. At $1,200 or $1,500, I got a lot of solutions for that at that price. So I think that it just depends on where they land. At $500 or $600, take my money. We'll standardize on this for a webcam. So it just depends on where. Now they're saving a little money by giving you an interchangeable lens, so they could theoretically give you the body for $500 or $600, and then let you go out and find what you're going to use. I think that it is interesting. I think it for those of us who, like, for me, it's probably not the right solution. For me, sending something to somebody else, it could be the right solution. Having all the controls available on the computer. One of the things you'll see here is this is something that, when they show the other one, that's something you only get in the Pro version of Resolve, like that color correction. Now, most people wouldn't know what to do with it, but they have a beginner and a professional mode where they can kind of, really fine tune color and so on and so forth. If they keep developing that, and they have a very software-oriented camera, they could do something pretty interesting. But it will depend on what the price is, as far as whether it's competitive or not. So if they can figure out a way to come in at a really low cost, then it might be something that's worth it. But if they come in at $1,200, I would say even anything over $800, it's going to be really hard to get people to buy, because they can buy other things that will look better. To be honest, the Sony 6400s and all of those Super 35, the ZV-E10 is a Super 35 sensor. It's going to look better. It's going to be, and so the problem is that's the challenge they have. But it has a lot of features that are built straight for social media. Could work.
And when I think about webcams, my first thought is, how does this work for normal people? People who aren't going to get a switcher, who aren't going to know how to shade a camera. Are they able to get it up out of the box, get it focused, and get a reasonably good picture without too much effort? And what intrigues me about this camera, depending on where it's priced, obviously, but what intrigues me about this camera, what I hope other cameras decide to go down the road of, is making a really good interface for software. Because you can have the best looking camera in the world, but the second it gets technically a little too complex, you're going to lose part of your audience. And when you're thinking about rolling something out at a business level or rolling something out to non-technical family members, that's where the interfaces and the experience is really everything. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana asks the panel, does anyone use a clamp meter when connecting to or setting up power? Are they of any value at lower amps?
Ronnie?
I'm not using this for lower amps. One thing that is really important when you're using lower amps is if it's just a socket in the wall, you should be more worried about what other stuff has been plugged into the same line or fuse in the main distribution. So what you need to check is to have everything that is plugged into that line under control. Normally, and this is actually what we are talking about. So most of these are rated with pretty high amps, so 500-600 amps, 400 amps, etc. So we tend to see the electrical guys or the electrical department using this to really have control over big stages. But for smaller productions, I tend to be more wary about summing together what we have and have a full control of what equipment we are putting into each socket, and making sure that we are alone on that socket, if that makes any sense.
Courtney?
Yeah, the thing with these clamp meters are, and they're used, as Ronnie said, by electricians who are setting up power feeds, let's say, from a generator. And in order for these to work, this is the one that he linked to, is about $51 on Amazon. There are cheaper ones out there. Here's one at Harbor Freight for half the price. And the way these work is you have to clip the hot lead inside the clamp here. That does. The jaws open up here, and the wire has to pass through the center of that. And you can't put the hot and the neutral through that same side, or otherwise it won't read out. So you have to be able to separate the wires so that the hot and the neutral are separate. And so you have to only clamp this around one leg of the of your AC in order for it to read. A better solution for low amperage is something like this. I have one sitting on the floor right over there, called a kilowatt. And this will tell you how many amps something is pulling. You just plug it into your outlet, and then you plug whatever you're going to test into the outlet here. And it'll tell you, you can see, you can read the volts, the amps, how many watts it's using, the frequency of the AC voltage. So if it's 50 hertz, 60 hertz, or if it's off 60 hertz. And the important thing is this kilowatt hour over on the corner there. These meters, these kilowatt meters, measure how much current is used over a period of time. So you plug it in like you plug your refrigerator in. You want to know how much current is my refrigerator using a day. And it will time and tell you how many watts or how many amps it uses over a period of time, like a day. So then you can calculate how much am I spending per kilowatt hour on this particular appliance. So that comes in really handy. And so if you have something that you're suspecting, that uses a lot of power, like an electric heater, typically they're either 750 or 1500. But, and usually they just switch between those two amperages. But if you have something in question, you don't know how much your air conditioner is pulling, you can plug it into this kilowatt meter and get a readout over time.
And then if you pair one of those kilowatts with my favorite equation, which is electricity is West Virginia, watts equals volts times amps. And so if I take a kilowatt and I say, okay, well, my watts divided by 100 is my amps, because if you're on 110 or 120 in the United States, you're building in a little factor of safety, and the math is really easy. So if it's 1,500 watts, like it's a heater or something or a microwave, it's probably 15 amps, and you don't want to put anything else on that circuit. We've got evening shows for you to watch live or later. We've got extra hours on Mondays at 6 p.m. Every now and again, there's an office hours special. That's Tuesdays at 6 p.m. And then the rundown is Thursday nights, also at 6, all Pacific time. Catch us in the evening if you're not getting enough of us in the morning. Next question.
Coming to us through the QR code, Ryan Clark in Marietta, Georgia asks, does anyone have tips for color matching cameras in vMix? I have 2 PTZ Optics cameras that match perfectly, but we recently added another PTZ camera, and I've spent hours trying to get it to match the PTZ Optics. Any advice or tricks would be great.
Alex.
So I'm going to give you the best advice that you don't want to hear. Get rid of that PTZ and go back to a PTZ Optics and get the same make and model. They'll all match, and then you won't spend any time on this. You're going to wrestle with this all the time. Like, I'm just letting you know, whatever you saved on buying a non-brand that isn't part of what you already have, if you don't care, it'll be fine. If you care about color and you care about them matching perfectly, the problem is color science. And there's two challenges that you run into. One is that the color science is going to be different between the cameras. Number two is most PTZ cameras don't have enough resolution in the control to ever get them to look exactly the same. So if you're looking for the kind of matching that you would have on a larger camera, it's not going to happen. Like, it's just not going to, you can't just white balance it and have it line up. So if you really want to go down this path, you are going to need a color chart. Now, that color chart, the easiest one to use is a Dumont chart. You might be able to rent one, be able to figure that out. A Chroma Dumont chart from DSC Labs is the best way to do it because it allows you to have a pattern. I talked about this earlier this week, but So this pattern here that goes around, it allows you, there's two things that it allows for. One is that it allows you, this will draw a signal in your vector scope so that you can match them. You can see both of them. You can switch back and forth and see both of them there. The second thing you can do is you can split. What I'll do is I'll do a transition where I split right down the spine of these colors, and I can match one camera to the inside and the other camera to the outside, and I can sit there and tweak the camera until all those colors match. And if all the colors match on a 12R or a 24R or 28R, it's going to work. so those are if you see the line, it's not matching, right? So that's a way to do that. You're going to end up spending a lot of time making this work, and it's never going to be perfect. Like I as someone who's done this for 25 years, for live cameras, I'm just telling you that mixing and matching cameras is very difficult with professional cameras. Once you go to PTZs, you're in no man's land, and it will never, again, if you're willing to be close, or if we use that third camera as something that is not the same as the other camera. So a lot of times we use that PTZ as a crowd camera. We use it as a something other camera, a close-up camera on something that isn't going to show a lot of the same. So we're not cutting between two faces. That's really the one that kills you. You got to make sure that the ones cutting to faces are the same brand and model for PTZs. Again, we mix and match regular cameras every once in a while. We try to avoid it because of what you're dealing with, just because I have to, I count, when I buy equipment, I calculate time into it. Like I calculate how long will this take me to administer, not just what is the cost of the hardware. And when you put time into it, it makes it much easier to make a decision between hardware.
Jonas?
A couple things I'll say is make sure if you want to go down this route, make sure that first you make similar adjustments on the camera. The best idea is to try to make it match within the camera. You should be aware that if you bring it into vMix, you already have a processed signal, and color correcting that, especially if you're in an 8-bit workflow, is going to lead to worse results than if you can get very close in the camera. That means making sure your white balance is right, using a chart like Alex showed you to understand what the difference is. But then what I'll say is one of the common issues, and you can see the same chart here, I just pulled that into vMix, that there's two places within vMix where you can make changes to color. You can do color correction here, where I can move my lift, gamma, and gain around. You can, but you can also use color adjust. One of the issues I see with a lot of operators is that they try to use both at the same time, which I found will always lead you down a path where you're moving too many variables, and then it's really hard to match those. The other thing is, if you have a chart like this and you use Resolve, take a clip with all of your cameras, put it into Resolve, and then you can create a difference between those and generate a lot for that. In the latest version, if you go under effects here, you can now add a LUT effect in here. So you could load a LUT that way. That being said, then you really need to be like in a consistent environment as well. I would probably start with color adjust, see how far you can get with that, and then go into color correction. But really, like, take a chart or something that is known and then look at the difference. Like, it already helps a lot being able, and this is a general thing, like not only for this specific type, being able to talk well about the difference between two pictures is worth a lot in our industry. Like being able to say, oh yeah, that's a green shift, that's a red shift, that's the yellows are a little intense or moved here. Like that is worth a lot. So like take a chart like that, look at it in a waveform, and then modify values and see, oh, look at that. The reds actually are doing this. You can use within vMix. One of the things I like to do is if you go here, you can actually have your color bar, can have your waveform, you can have your vector scope, but you can also use the position and do cropping. So like, for example, what I would do is I would crop it so I only see the green, and so I only see green. And then you look at your greens. What is the difference there? And when you make adjustments, you should look at the whole picture. But like being able to speak about what the difference is and being able to formulate that is worth a lot if you have to debug it, explain it to someone else. But start at the camera first. I think trying to fix this within vMix is going to be an issue.
Man, we have such smart people on this panel every day. It's so cool to hear that life experience, and you get it for free, and you can ask those questions 24/7 at askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. Nothing to log into, nothing to sign up for. You can just shoot that QR code, askofficehours.global, throw in your name, throw in your question, and we'll work it in over the next couple shows. Next question.
And here's one from the QR code. Anahuahai Black Bear Marshall in Hawaii is asking, if HDMI can't be frame locked, then what does the ATEMS frame lock on every input feature really do? Is it not actually locking the frames for every input to match the system and lock into the ME or DVE and key layers?
Go ahead, Jonas.
On the HDMI, the issue is that if we look at how those frames get delivered, I have 4 sources here. And since we don't have a common timing source, and that is what you do with reference, you provide all of your devices with a time. Now we start a new frame, start sending your new frame. Now we start a new frame. And then in broadcast, what we often also have is that you look at the difference of those frames when they start, and then you can offset it. Is it by a line offset? Is it by less than a line offset? So like even, it's not like you just jam sync and then everything is fine. If you really need to get it precise, you still need to sync it manually that way. But the reason why we say you can't use it for key fill in this case is these reds are the buffers that the ATEM does to frame lock. What it does is, instead of saying, oh, we'll just take whatever frame whenever we get it, then you would have black spots there because, like, for example, this frame isn't fully there when the ATEM tries to render. What it does instead is it buffers all the frames, so it keeps the last frame until it has the next frame. That does a couple things. It adds at least 1 frame of latency. If you have your frame converters then in there, that allows you to use 30 FPS with 29, with 60, with 50, which is, I think, the feature that you're referencing to. Then there's even more latency there because it needs to be able to convert those. But the problem that we're talking about is if we now just take a line, this one might be perfect, and you have frame 1 of all of your sources. Let's say this one, we're going to make it easier, and we're going to get rid of those 2. This is just key fill. Perfect. Now I got the same. But what's probably going to happen is that your line is more something like here. Or if we look at the second frame, it's somewhere like here. You now have the second frame of your fill signal, but the first frame of your key signal. And that is fine if it's static, probably, because then it's the same. Those are the same frames. But if you do a movement like a lower third coming out, then this is where you're going to see a ghosting effect, where either the key signal comes out first. You see that then that it looks like there's a black border is how it looks most of the times. If you have like a wipe, you see a black border in front of it, or the fill signal comes out first. Then it looks like your lower third is cropped weird. So that is why we say don't use that, because the ATEM does need to add that frame sync at the start of HDMI to be able to work with all of those sources, because you don't have a way to sync those. That being said, some of the ATEMs don't allow you to ingest sync, so they still have a frame sync even on SDI. That being said, SDI tends to deviate less. how much difference in latency in the frame arriving there is, but that is the reason. And that is, by the way, also the reason why PTP in 702110 is so complex, because in 2110, this is not only a frame and an audio frame, but this could be video, and this is audio, and now you need to sync those together. That's why you need such precise timestamping with PTP, which other protocols don't need, because they just keep those together.
Ronnie?
Yeah, everything that Jonas said. And just remember, the different type of ATEM equipment have different type of limitations. Some can frame sync, some can scale. The older models can't do either. And just beware what you can do on those. But as Jonas said, just to emphasize, if you're using key fill, at least you can get lucky if you have a good playout signal, so that the key fill is coming from the same device, like a deck link or similar. We've done that in a pinch sometimes, and you can ingest that. Just make sure that everything is the same type of equipment. So if you have SDI to HDMI converters, you have to be, you don't know exactly what the ref signal going into this is, because you can't control it, and there is no way to monitor this at all. If the problem is that you are seeing the issues, what Jonas illustrated so very well, being a specialist at this, nothing less would be expected. You should probably think of upgrading your systems to a little bit more advanced switchers, which actually have the reference of Genlock inputs. But then remember, you have to have cameras that support that as well. And if you're going to use key fill, you need something as a deck link with reference in or Genlock in, so that you can have a single Genlock generated for all these to have all sources synced to the same reference signal. So then, of course, the budget has to be increased, and you at least get frame synced into your production. But it costs a little bit.
Courtney, real quick.
Yeah, it's been covered pretty well. There's a difference between frame sync and vertical and horizontal sync. In order to mix any two signals, they have their vertical sync signal and their horizontal sync signal have to match up in order to dissolve between those two or cut between those two without the frame rolling. And that's what the HDMI inputs, the cheaper ATEM minis have. They take the first input, HDMI input, and they synchronize the vertical and horizontal sync of all the other incoming signals through the other HDMI inputs to that primary one. So they use that first one usually as a reference. And sometimes, depending upon how the images that are coming in, what frequency they're at, what frame rate they're at, it'll digitally correct those to line up the vertical and horizontal sync signals. But it may increase a frame synchronization delay. In other words, input 2 may be a frame behind input 3, so it'll cause a delay of more than a frame. And that's where you run into problems, as was mentioned earlier. If you have two separate signals for key and fill, those have to stay in sync if you're going to have any kind of motion in the frame. Otherwise, you'll see fringing around where your key and your fill overlap. So that's the difference. And there are, as Ronnie said, there are reference inputs on the higher end, some of the Television Studio HD, some of the ATEM switchers that have both HDMI and SDI that will do frame sync to a reference input. So you can have a sync generator that'll synchronize everything to that reference input rather than just taking the first input and synchronizing everything else to that.
Next question.
From Aaron Gencarelli in Flagstaff, Arizona, USA. Could the panelists share how they've integrated Dante into their production workflows?
Ronnie.
Yeah, so in the studio where we are mostly having productions, we have a big Allen Heath mixer with Dante, of course. That mixer is having loads of faders, and we can have multiple Macs and machines using Dante virtual sound cards in them, and we tend to split out audio from each applications in their separate Dante feed. So, for example, keynotes have their own Dante feed going onto the network. Chrome has its own feed. The master output from the machine has its own feed. Intercom has their own feeds, etc. So everything is being split on each of these machines, going out to the Dante network. These are then collected into the mixer, and we can have like 6 faders for machine 1, 6 faders for machine 2, etc. So that the audio tech guy has full control over every aspects of what type of sounds is coming from each machines. We also use this for microphones, starting to using the more advanced EWDX from Sennheiser, with the 4 inputs on each one unit. We collect all these Dante feeds coming from these microphones into the mixer as well. And everything has to do with, getting rid of all those cables going everywhere. Everything is now just one interface going into the Dante network. But be aware, not all built-in Max interfaces are supporting Dante very well. So we tend to use, for all the machines at least the older machines we have, are using specific external Ethernet interfaces only for the Dante, so that we can separate the network traffic going onto internet, etc., and isolate that away from the Dante traffic, which is on a separate virtual LAN with our studio. So.
Alex?
Yeah, Mickey said that he said multiple Pro Tools HDX systems with matrix boxes feeding a single matrix 2 for feeding Dolby Atmos rendering and mastering unit for Atmos mixing, then several dozen channels out of the RMU to monitoring system and to recording system to re-render recording. Hundreds of channels moving around via Dante in my small facility. So there's a small facility. Even on the road, a lot of times we'll use something like this. So, for instance, one of the remotes that I did recently, we were trying to be as compact as possible, and so we had I was using a Scorpio, which has Dante built into it. Inside of that Scorpio, we had a series. We were connecting to Zoom, so we had 2 Zoom machines. We had a Unity machine, and we used both those Zoom machines and the Unity channels using Unity Connect. Delivered those channels back via Dante using Dante Virtual Sound Card and an external Ethernet, and sent those back into the mixer. In addition to that, we had Dante belt packs. We had about 4 of these belt packs that are made by Studio Technologies that allows us to have wired belt packs there, that fed back into the same network that went into that little Scorpio. Then we had the wireless mics that were fed in via analog into the Scorpio. So these are electrosonic wireless mics, and those go into there. Inside of that entire process, we're building mix minuses so that the comms hear what they need to hear, so the camera operators need to hear what they hear. We have 2 different in-ear monitors. All of those things are being delivered, and then the mixes that are required, we then delivered back to HyperDeck Pros, the old ones that have analog in, but we were using the Audinate analog inputs to Dante. So there is Ethernet going out and then just turning into analog right at the very end, so that we could deliver the different channels that we wanted to back to the backup records. But all of that was Ethernet, except for the transmitters delivering back directly into the Scorpio. Everything there is just Ethernet connected to make it all work.
Coming up on Office Hours, you can catch us on the weekend for our live-only, the members-only shows. We've got our Q&A on Saturday, and then Sundays, our introspection show. We talk a little bit more about Office Hours. You can ask questions about us, about the industry, and we'll chew on things for a little longer, but you got to be in Makana to watch those shows. So if you're not yet in Makana, check out officehours.global/join. Find your way in. Next question.
Here's one from the QR code from Manzi Alain Elise in Kigali, Rwanda. Please explain the process of recording Zoom hybrid recording and recording of the venue using one computer. It's hard sometimes because you can't record the Zoom online audience because audio guy is not sending back the feed to avoid feedback.
Jonas?
At this point, you probably need some way to merge what the audio guy is sending you, which is a mix minus, and what you're sending him. I would just use something like OBS to record the audio that way, or any other audio recorder that you like. The reason I say OBS is because that way it's super simple to use an audio output and an audio input recorder, and then you're done. I would just record those two because you do want to record it in one place. Yeah, I think that's the best you'll get.
Ronnie?
Yeah, another way to do it, depending on budget, of course, is using a Mac Mini. And in that Mac Mini, you install a software called, you can use Ecamm as well as Mimo Live, for instance, or OBS even. And just use one of the two first one, Ecamm and Mimo Live, or one of them, and connect to the Zoom room and have an audio interface capturing the audio from the sound guy, or you probably need a capture device to have both the video and the audio captured into the Mimo Live. And then you can, in Mimo Live, just have separate recordings of each of the sources you have coming into your computer. And if you go even further, you can use something like Zoom ISO to even separate each of the audio feeds from each of the participants in the meeting. And then you have a separate recording of everything, and you can edit that afterwards if that is what you're trying to achieve.
Alex?
Yeah, Mickey said that get feeds and record the venue sources and the Zoom sources separately, mix them in post, or if you need to mix live, mix it in a separate mixing console. John Wallace added, unroute the audio return from Zoom to your left-right output, and you should be able to record it at the board or at an external recorder. If you actually have access, and I think there may be one floating around in Rwanda that I might have left, if you have an access to a Pix 240, the other thing you can do is the Pix 240 allows you to record the audio from your SDI or HDMI and add the analog on top of that. So you can actually have the analog inputs going in, and they'll be recorded as separate channels from the HDMI that you might be getting from your Zoom or other things like that. And we've done that to record and keep those together if you don't have a whole mixer and other things to make that possible.
Next question.
From the QR code, Shema Hervé in Kigali, Rwanda asked the panel, "Hi, I've faced a flickering video feed issue during a live broadcast, which was resolved by adjusting the output resolution. Could this be related to distortion, similar to microphone interference, or is it a different technical issue? Thank you."
Bill?
I'm sorry, I was lost in something else. No, I'm sorry, you got to pass
Go
me
ahead,
by.
Courtney.
Well, it's not necessarily distortion, unless what could cause things to flicker is if you've got a really bright light that causes so much interference it can be confused as a horizontal sync signal. The light is really bright. So in that way, it can cause flickering if you have a really bright area in your frame that is way overexposed. That could happen, but typically changing the frame rate, it's usually what causes a flicker, except in my case. You'll see my video flicker every now and then. That has to do with a USB buffer overflow and is necessarily the same thing you were experiencing. But if whatever you're using to ingest that video is expecting a certain resolution and frame rate, any differences from that expected resolution and frame rate can cause it to hiccup every now and then to try and resynchronize itself to pick up for frames lost or loss of sync. The sync drifts too far off, and then it'll resynchronize, and it will flicker when it resynchronizes. So if you solved it by changing the frame rate, the difference can also be, especially in broadcast, most broadcast is 1080i, not 1080p. So if you're feeding 1080 P30 or P60, that can be a problem. If you're feeding into a broadcast mixer, let's say, that is expecting 1080i, that could be your problem. Also, this, of course, we always recommend the MDHX, which fixes problems like this because it changes the frame rate. It not only changes the resolution, you can go between 720 and 1080, but it changes the frame rate too, and it accepts, 128 different there's like 128 different combinations of resolution and frame rate. A better one, I would say, tool to have in your kit here is the big brother that. It's the MD Cross V2, which does everything to frame synchronize. And you can plug this into your output and you can read on that little LCD there what the actual resolution and frame rate is of your outgoing video, and then match your converter to the same frame rate. So it'll take whatever frame rate you're sending in over HDMI or SDI and convert it to the same resolution and frame rate as your output. And this one has the benefit, it's $100 more, but this one has the benefit of having a test generator built in, so it can generate test signals like color bars and a variety of different high-resolution patterns and chip patterns and chip charts and things. So you can use it as a good signal source before you even plug your input into it. And that stable signal source then can be set to the output, and you can just check it for flicker because it is a stable single source.
Alex.
There's a 90% chance that I would say 95% chance that the problem is a cable. So the cable length is going to be the issue. So your cable is either running too far or it's too thin for how far it's running. So what you want to do is take someone's got an open mic with a keyboard. So what you want to do is if it's flickering, my guess is when you change the resolution, the output resolution, you didn't go up, you went down. So you went down to something that took less bandwidth. 3G tends to be, if you're doing something that is 1080p 50, for instance, you might have gone down to 1080p 25 and saw that it worked because it's a much lower bandwidth and it's now able to run on that longer cable. If you're seeing that flickering regularly, this is the error corrector failing, and so what you want to do is try it with a shorter cable length and see if it goes away at that same frame rate, and I bet you'll find that it does. This also depends on the devices that are there. There are 3 levels of frame correctors that are built into the AJA cards and the hardware, and only one in the Blackmagic hardware. And so as a result, the AJA hardware will tend to be able to be more resilient, and the decimators oftentimes are a little bit more resilient than a standard switcher input. So that's another thing to kind of consider as well.
If you're finding office hours valuable, there are a few ways you can help. Of course, you can like and subscribe to the panel. We've also got volunteer opportunities during the show and around the show. You can see those at officehours.global/volunteer. And of course, you can donate. When you contribute to Office Hours, you help us keep going every single day. We are a nonprofit, and we'd appreciate it. officehours.global/donate. Next question.
Zach Stahlsmith in Chautauqua, New York. I'd like to tighten up security on my House of Worship admin production network. Can NDI Access Manager help with this?
Jonas?
Yes and no. There's 2 ways about NDI. First, we have the discovery. There's 3 different methods that works. There's MDNS, which is like multicast all across your network. Then there is direct connection, so you can point a specific device to another device, and then there's using a discovery server. Within these methods, there's also what is called send and receive groups that you can use to limit the scope of who can receive and send to those groups. That being said, most of the time people are using public or something obvious, and if you can guess that group, then you're in. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you want to secure it down. Yes, you can use NDI Access Manager. One thing to note is it's harder to change that file than it is to read that file, because all it does is it changes the NDI JSON file that you can find in different locations, depending if it's Linux, Mac OS, or Windows. But to change that, you do need admin permissions. That's one bright side with where that file is located. The other thing that you can do is if you look at the different ports that are used for NDI, you can on the network and on the devices set up the firewall to only allow access to those ports from specific devices. So like if you don't want to do MDNS, plug port 5353. But then also if you want to like prevent NDI from flowing out at all, that's where like port 5961 and up are used. So per NDI feed, there is one port they're used. So keep that in mind, that there's kind of the two layers. There's like kind of security through obscurity, where like you could use like a longer passphrase for your NDI group name, but then it's still hard to protect that, especially if someone has physical access to that device. Even if they don't have admin permissions, they can easily read that key out of there. So I would like do a mixed approach, like also how hard do you want to play, right? Like, do you just want to make sure that whoever is on the iPad and happens to have an NDI viewer on that can't see the sources? Then you'll probably find just setting access groups and locking down MDNS. And maybe you'll just use direct connections instead.
Next question.
Next up is Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. What precautions do you take to make sure you are not overloading your power circuits?
Courtney?
Well, most power circuits in most homes have circuit breakers that are designed to flip if you're overloading them. So they're usually set at 15 or 20 amps. So if you're overloading them and it blows that circuit breaker, hey, you're putting too much in. But one thing that has come in handy, because I've had a lot of power problems recently, and I have this Cyber Power. All my critical equipment is plugged into one of these 1500-watt UPSs. And the nice thing about this is it has this little voltage readout right here. And I find that what happens in my house, because it was wired 100 years ago, or at least 75 years ago, that when I'm running the heater and the microwave, the voltage will drop and to like 105 volts from 120 volts. And that's where you know that the cable that's running through your house cannot carry the amperage that you're pulling. So that means that you're pulling more current than you should be through that wiring. So if you see the voltage drop on that UPS meter, then you know, hey, maybe you ought to turn off one of those things because you're pulling too much current.
Ronnie?
I would say a calculator is your best tool for this. Calculate the exact number of amps or milliamps that are summed up together. And if this is mobile equipment, of course, you have to know what each of these racks or gadgets are using of power. On a stage, of course, there is lights, there is fog machines, etc. So everything can be calculated and use the max effect, and never approach the max effect of the circuit that you are actually plugging this into. So have good documentation of everything you are using, and make sure that you have clean circuits that are not being used like for a vacuum cleaner in another room that suddenly breaks the circuit breaker. So that's another thing. But regarding the question, being really quick, the link which is regarding the power break in UK, we had a similar humongous power problem here in northern part of Norway the other day. It affected around 20,000 people, and this is the reason why. There was an avalanche actually taking out one of the big backbone power masts and causing 20,000 people to be out of power for many, many hours. So you can't always protect and calculate with a calculator.
Alex?
If you watch the very beginning of Connections from James Burke, it talks about how one relay switch took out New York. so it was, that caused a cascading error. It's very power at a large level is very complicated. We've seen the Super Bowl go out for a period of time. Heathrow, you can't really calculate for that much power when there's a fire. There's nothing you can do about that. For our own productions, we make sure that, again, to target 40% capacity. That's what we want to have when we're asking for things. We're making requests. We are using the kilowatt. We're using a variety of other things. We're making sure we know exactly what our usage is going to be when it's on and at capacity. Like an Elemental, for instance, has a standing usage, and then what it's using when it's encoding. We want to know what it's using when it's encoding, and that's our number. We calculate all those numbers, and then we multiply them by a little bit more than 2. And then that's what we're asking for all the time, to make sure that we have tons of headroom that's sitting there. 60% your capacity should be considered your ceiling. Do not do productions over 60% your capacity for it. So those are the things that we kind of make sure.
Thank you so much to the panel for being here today. Fantastic answers, fantastic life experience shared. It's really a privilege getting to spend my Friday morning getting a little bit smarter. Also to the back-end crew, working not only on the show, but also all over the world, all around the clock, keeping us organized, keeping us moving forward. It's impossible to do it without you. And to the producers, you ask such great questions. I mean, I never know what it's going to be, and I come in the morning and I think, oh man, it's going to be an IT day today, and then we had like 3 or 4 power questions, and it's just, you never know where it's going to go, but it's so cool, which makes it so special. So thank you very much. We can't do it without any of you. And if we sent questions back, QR code questions will work in as we get into the weekday shows next week. If it was a Makana question, check in your notes. For the Tlaloc traversal today, we went 14,000 miles. That's 20,000 kilometers, 110 million bananas for scale. See you in after hours.
I was watching while we were doing the frame sync answer. I was like, it was going pretty long. And so I opened up, I looked at the back end, and I was like, I wonder if we're dropping, because usually long answers would start dropping, and it was like a rocket up. Like everyone was just staying to listen to the answer. Yeah, I was like, that's not something you see very often.
By the way, my apologies
answer.
for the distraction. I had a small family thing. It's not a disaster, but it just freaked me out for a second. So
it's all good.
Again.
It's people are compelling. It's amazing. I love Jonas, the way that you explain things with your visuals, that you seem to have just like at the ready all the time, makes it so, like, it just makes it so much clearer. It's great. Thank you.
Yeah, that was cool.
Do a lot of questions come in early.
Yeah. Send those questions. If you're still listening, send those questions in early. That makes it, lets us look.
I've discovered that if I'm running my space heater, popcorn takes a lot longer to pop in the microwave.
Really? Does it draw down your network?